Ah, the Game Boy Advance. If you were a gamer in the early 2000s, you probably remember how popular this little handheld was. The successor to the wildly successful Game Boy and Game Boy Color lines, the Game Boy Advance was Nintendo's system entering the new millennium. But what made the Game Boy Advance tick, and how was it able to be backwards compatible with the older Game Boy games while playing newer games as well? Find out in today's episode of TechWave. During the late 90s, the Game Boy Color had been introduced to include color into the Game Boy line of handhelds. However, despite the upgrade, graphics were still the same overall, and gamers were starting to look for a little more from the little handheld. Nintendo was already well at work designing a new handheld to please the more graphically demanding gamers. On March 21st, 2001, Nintendo introduced the 32-bit Game Boy Advance system, the most powerful mass-marketed handheld at the time. The Game Boy Advance would finally see its US release on June 11th of the same year, and from there the system took off and never looked back. And I have to say, this little system has a ton of character. It fits really well in the hand, and who doesn't love that startup sound? Still got it. The Game Boy Advance was powered by an ARM7 processor that was also used in the Nokia 6110, an older cell phone that was released a few years prior. The ARM7 ran at a comfortable 16.47 MHz. To keep backwards compatibility seamless, a separate Z80 processor running at either 4 or 8 MHz was also installed. So yes guys, this little system technically has two processors in here. Now that Z80 was mostly used for backwards compatibility, so when you'd put a Game Boy Color or a Game Boy game in, it would switch over to that processor to then give it the correct speed and feel of an original Game Boy or Game Boy Color. That's why you were able to play these games so easily on here, and it played exactly the same. RAM was split into several pools, starting with internal RAM of 32 kilobytes and VRAM of 96 kilobytes. These were kept internal to the CPU for faster access times. Outside of the CPU, 256 kilobytes of DRAM was used for other tasks as well. The LCD used was a TFT, or thin film transistor color screen, that provided 15-bit color depth and the ability to show 512 colors when in character mode. The resolution of the screen is 240 by 160 pixels, situated in a 3:2 aspect ratio. Now this aspect ratio at 3:2 still offers that widescreen look, but it was also a little taller from bottom to top. And it's funny to note that a lot of new tablets are starting to go back to that. For example, the Surface Pro 3 did introduce a 3:2 aspect ratio, going away from the 16:9, because when in portrait mode, it is wider for things like writing notes. Here we go, the Game Boy Advance had that aspect ratio quite a while ago. What's really amazing though is all of this hardware at the time was able to be powered by two AA batteries, getting around 15 hours of gameplay. So enough about the specs, let's get an actual close-up look of the internals of this Game Boy Advance. We'll go ahead and take it apart and see if we can locate both processors and the RAM. We'll see how well we can do with that, but let's get started on that, guys. We'll pull the screen out too. So here we go, guys. We'll take this apart. Now, the one I have, it works fine, as you saw earlier. Batteries, though, don't have a battery door. I don't know why. For some reason, those always go missing, but we'll make it work. So, the Game Boy Advance is one of those systems that uses those weird tri-wing bits. Why they did that, I'm not sure. Maybe it was to prevent people from opening them, but we would just order these overseas anyway. Other than that, though, you just need Phillips head screwdrivers. You just need this guy to get in initially. So we have a couple screws here that will open up, and we're going to see if we can identify these processors, possibly the RAM if it's noticeable on here. I'm not sure how noticeable it is. And I'll see if I can pull that screen out as well. I'm not sure if the screen is at all glued to the side, but we'll see. Alright, so right away, there's not much to see here. This is the back. You have a cartridge slot here, which is soldered down to it. I assume it runs plastic through here to hold it from the other side, so it doesn't get knocked off when you push a cartridge into it. It also looks like it uses this backing to help hold that as well, which is fine. Screen does plug in up here. Everything else is pretty straightforward, though. There's nothing really fancy going on this side, but I do know these sides do pop off like this. They are just held in just because. The shoulder buttons are also on like a spring here. These also just come right off, but I don't really need to take them off to get the board out, so I'm just going to go ahead and unscrew the board now, and we'll see if we can get that guy out of there. Fortunately, there's only 2 screws that hold it together for this board. There's 2 screws holding it in. So it should just come right out. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to detach the screen first so I don't pull on that too hard, because this is a ribbon cable here. Most times it's either a, depending on this one, which one it is, it's either a 32 or a 40 pin. Yep, I can't tell. I was trying to count for a second. That's going to take a while. So that pulls right out of there, and the whole board should now detach from that. Our screen's here. I'll still take that screen out. It's going to be a pain to get out, but I will get that out of there. But for now, let's take a look at this board. We have our speaker hanging off here. That's just held in by 2 wires that solder there, a positive and a negative, which is pretty straightforward. Now, on the other side, we actually have some interesting stuff. Now, right away, you can see there's 2 big chips here. That, I know right away, is our ARM processor. It's actually printed right on it, and it says ARM processor. The other chip looks like it's RAM, more than likely. I'd have to look it up, but it does look like a flash memory module. The other processor is not obvious. I was hoping it would be, but it is not like blatantly obvious or anything. There's a MOSFET, another MOSFET. So I'm wondering if this is a revision or it's built into this ARM chip for the separate coprocessor. We could find out, though. That shouldn't be too difficult. We just have to look up some of these chips on the back there. So after doing some quick research, guys, I found that people online are talking about the coprocessor actually being integrated with this ARM chip. The coprocessor being that Z80 that I was talking about, basically being, I guess, similar to like a big little configuration where you can switch to it if needed. But overall, the board itself is very, very simple to look at. Obviously, this is the RAM. I double checked it. Everything checks out there. And yes, this is the Game Boy Advance motherboard. There's not a ton to it, but overall, at that time, awesome piece of electronics. It really did its job, and obviously the games we would see were great. They played awesome. Now let's take a look at this screen. Let's see if I can get it out of here without breaking it. Usually this is glued in some way, and it's not usually easy to get out of here. Also, for comparison of size, this is a Game Boy Color motherboard on this side. This is a Game Boy Advance motherboard there. So you can see it's not terribly different in terms of size. So I'll leave that there while I pop this guy out. And this is our little screen here, the 240 by 163.332 aspect ratio. And it's just a standard screen. It's nothing too fancy. It has no backlight, so it's very thin because it has no backlight. Now, a lot of people like to add backlights to these, or I should say front lights to these, and that's not terribly difficult to do. Some people have added the AGS 101 screen to these as well, which is kind of a pain to do, but it looks pretty cool when it's done. I guess all it's left to do, guys, is reassemble this. So let's get started with that. Hey guys, that's going to do it for this episode of TechWave. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at the inside of the Game Boy Advance. I know I did. And you know what? This is one of my favorite systems ever. I mean, back in the day, this was it. Playing Pokemon Fire Red or Golden Sun. There are so many good games on this system that a lot of people probably didn't get to play. Zelda the Minish Cap, awesome game. So if you have not played the Game Boy Advance, I recommend getting one. These ones are probably like $20 to $25. I would actually tell you, though, to splurge on the Game Boy Advance SP. They're about $40 to $50, but they have a front or backlit screen, depending on which one you get. And then it also has the ability to charge to the wall. You don't have to keep getting AA, so you can play it at nighttime, and you don't have to keep going out the Radio Shack to get more batteries. But, guys, that's going to do it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you next time.